Hi everybody, I hope you're having a great day. I have tried over the last few days to make a video about 100 times and either I can't get the technical stuff right, or I find myself rambling for 23 minutes, and try as I may to keep things topical, they kind of all run together. So I really am going to keep this as short as possible. This is going to be a video about narcissistic abuse, the early years, my early childhood memories, and trauma dreams, which I'm sure that there are people out there that have these awful realistic dreams. They're like reliving the abandonment and the ostracism. So I'd like to put it out there to anyone who suffers in that way. I would love to hear how you deal with those dreams. So, I don't think that I have gone into depth about the birth vessel and many of the things that she did in the early years. I talked about what led up to the final no contact. But one of the things that became a topic of conversation during Thanksgiving holidays, that sort of thing, my birth vessel would always talk about what an ugly baby I was when I was born. Yes, and you know, you're so young and you hear this conversation when you're, you know, surrounded by family members, and it feels like attention. And so I remember distinctively going from feeling like I was getting attention to realizing that this was shameful. I remember, you know, as a young child recognizing how wrong that was. So that was when I was born, and then let's fast forward to the day I came home from the hospital. I was dropped on my head, and this is not something that I speculate about. My family knows about it. Anytime that it was brought up when I was young, it was just like, yeah, you were dropped on your head. You know, it was an accident, I guess they said. But it wasn't talked about much, and there was never any kind of like, oh, this horrible thing that happened. It was just never a big issue. And, you know, look, I get that it was the 70s and there weren't, you know, car seat requirements, but I can honestly tell you that if it were my baby and I was losing my footing, I would go down with that baby. My hands would be on that child's head, hitting the concrete, even if my legs were kicked out from underneath me. Let's see if I can adjust this a little bit here. Sorry. So, all of the baby infant pictures that I have are, you know, there's my little hand up to my head, so I'm sure that I was in pain. And then I remember being around 2, and I cannot for the life of me figure out why someone would give a 2-year-old a gold and amethyst ring, but my birth vessel did, probably to set me up for failure because I was teething. And I don't remember chewing the ring, but I remember being pulled into the bathroom and pointing at her, having her point at the ring in the trash and telling me what I had done, and being beaten about the head. When I was also around that same age, still young enough to not really have complete language, these are important things to note, I do remember blacking out and waking up in the doctor's office, the dentist office, and having x-rays of my teeth, which are all crooked on the bottom, because I was shoved into a toy box. And I was told that I fell into the toy box, but like I said, as you get older and you begin to dissect these things, they don't make sense. The toy box was ultra short. If I had been reaching into it as a toddler, I would have braced myself. I certainly wouldn't have thrown myself into it hard enough to dislodge all of my teeth and black out you know, it just wouldn't have happened. So I'm certain that she shoved me into the toy box. And then I think around that time I was beginning to get language, and that's when she sort of handed the abuse off to my enabler father. Now, I was his firstborn child, and I'll talk about my dad probably in another video, because I do know that he has unconditional love for me, but he has been so brainwashed that at this point I don't even really have a lot of desire. There's no way I could have a relationship with him that would be sane and fruitful in any way. So around that age, I was about 2.5, I remember being in diapers. I remember my dad being in his white underwear, and I remember him pulling me into his master bedroom and telling me the story, or asking me what happened to the good little girl that used to live here. Now, my 2.5-year-old mind, it automatically thinks, where's the other girl? I want to play with her. And so I kept asking, what little girl? What little girl? I remember this. I remember this. And I remember him saying repeatedly, no, you were the good little girl. Now you're a bad little girl. So every time I would ask about trying to understand who this little girl was, he made sure to help me understand that I was the bad little girl, that I was bad now. Proceeded to give me the belt, which I got the belt until I was 17 years old. And by the way, I never fought back. I never talked about this to anyone. I grew up in Texas, and people talked about getting the belt, and I just assumed that was normal, but not as often as I got it, and as young as I got it, and as old as I got it. When I was about 17 was the first time that I just instinctively fought back, and it was like with a backhand. And the one backhand, after 17 years of physical abuse, was all she needed to try and throw me into the mental institution. I mean, we literally drove straight there, speeding away, and I remember her begging them to take me and them refusing. And I think that's because they had questioned me, and I talked about all the things that were happening, and I'm assuming that they were able to see through what was happening to me, and they weren't going to be a dumping ground for abused children. Growing up, my birth vessel was really, she wasn't, emotionally involved. She wasn't affectionate. I don't have a single memory of her next to me creating some kind of a mother-daughter thing. We never made cookies together. We never cooked together. We never went to lunch together. We never got our nails together. I mean, those memories that other people have don't exist for me at all. When I was in high school, all she would do is come home from work, go into her room, and lay in bed and watch television until she would, until it was time for bed. And of course, we were her servants, bringing her cokes with ice, and bringing her a plate of dinner and doing the dishes. And those were generally my memories of my mother. And then, of course, my younger brother, he's 6 years younger than I am. He is absolutely the golden child. He is the boy they always wanted. And he was always treated, as if he could do no wrong. I think when I was younger, I was probably jealous of him, and I probably didn't treat him wonderfully. I don't remember, being abusive or anything like that, but I didn't know how to model love, unconditional love. Anyway, when I was 16, we were told that our parents were going to be divorcing, and that my mother would be moving out in March, and this was in November. So Christmas time was an awkward time. I had a serious boyfriend at that time, so I was able to kind of, divert my attentions over there. But again, we were told that she was moving out in March, and there weren't any Christmas decorations being put up, but still, on Christmas morning, myself and my golden child brother, we got up on Christmas morning, looked around the house, there was nothing. I remember being on the floor, like looking under furniture, crawling under things together with him, looking for any type of gift or acknowledgement that it was Christmas, only to find out that she had left on Christmas without telling us. She never acknowledged it, she never apologized for it, and we just had to take it. A little while later, I had my own apartment. I was told when I turned 17 that I would be living on, that I needed to go find a place of my own. She was done being a mother, and I went and did that for a couple of years, and then there was a point at which I needed to move back in financially, and she reluctantly let me move in, only to swiftly throw me out at the drop of a hat. I can't even remember how or why. But later, I think my brother was living with her, and she had decided that she wanted to move to the opposite end of the state. There was no urgency. She didn't have a job waiting for her. She didn't have a romance waiting for her. She just decided that that was the time to move. It was my younger brother's final year in high school, and she just left him and let him go and move into an apartment with his friend's family, and I think she was sending like $80 a month, which is a tawdry amount to raise a child every month. But she didn't even bat an eyelash, and still to this day, my golden child brother just has no idea how incredibly unloving that is, how she doesn't love him any more than she doesn't love me. And so those are a few of the backstories. Trying to think of any other really big ones, because at that point, I moved out, started living my own life. After Y2K, it was really difficult to find a job in technology where I was working, and my roommate was also from Texas, and so we decided to share expenses. We were talking about it, and I mentioned this to my mother. It's a lot to move, the moving truck, the gas, all of that. And she said, look, if that's all you're worried about, you don't have to worry about it. I'll pay for it. And you just get yourself here so you can get back on your feet and blah, blah, blah. So I moved in with her, and one of the first things that she did was she came home from work with a checking account that she had opened on my behalf. I think Narcissism Survivor talks about that. Look, don't ever let them help you financially. Don't ever let them open a bank account for you. I mean, she did everything by the Narcissistic book. She would pay for car repairs that I didn't ask for, and then tell me how I'm going to pay you back. Now, the move costs and all that stuff were like a gift when it was presented to me. But the moment that I got, and by the way, if she had talked about me paying her back, then I wouldn't have done it, because the whole point was to get back on my feet. So within a few days of me arriving, she sat down and said, "Oh, I wrote out how you're going to pay me back." At that point, my sister had come for a visit, and apparently my mother had been telling her all kinds of lies. I'd been there like 3 weeks, and I already had a part-time job, and was trying to put my life back together, and my sister and my mother ended up pinning me up against the wall and trying to hit me and trying to take away my car keys because I was trying to leave. And my mother tried to say, "Oh, that car is mine," because she helped co-sign on the note 5 years prior to that. And even though I made all the payments, that was the first time that I had a close call with no contact. And I went and I stayed with a friend for about a month, and my mother made a half-ass attempt with a letter that she didn't even finish writing. It wasn't even really apologetic, to try and reel me back in and I fell for it. So, those are just a few of the abusive backstory stuff that I had to deal with. And to this day, 90% of the dreams that I have are of being triangulated, of being abandoned, and they can be familiar surroundings. It could be modern day, and they'll be there with my friends who, abandoned me whenever I needed them, or whatever. And they're horrible dreams, and they're so real and they're so vivid that you wake up in a sad, depressed mood. I don't know how to deal with them. I think that when you're dealing with formative childhood trauma, it's so deep, and I don't know that there's really any way to reach it. So that's it. I'm sure that there are things that I will wish I had mentioned later, and I'll come back and circle back around to them, but I just wanted to share that with other people. And I realized that the kind of narcissistic abuse that I suffered was truly malignant, and there's physical abuse as well. So if anybody else is out there and has suffered something similar, you just keep moving forward and keep doing whatever you can to acknowledge that pain, to look at it for what it is, and without shame. I guess that's really about it. Again, I'd love to hear how you handle those toxic dreams, and I hope you're having a great week. Bye. Love you.